The global insurance industry is more than a market.
It's a movement powered by 3 million professionals around the world.
Together, we support communities as they rebuild after disaster.
Help businesses through risk and uncertainty.
Protect individuals as they plan for brighter futures.
This impact isn't possible without people.
That's why we attract, grow, and retain the very best talent.
Because when every voice is heard,
When every person feels they belong.
We don't just build careers.
We build a better tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Belonging builds tomorrow.
Good afternoon, everyone, and warm welcome to our dive-in event. My name is Anja Linsmeyer, and I'm the head of non-life of Munich Re Australia. Now, before we begin, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of which we meet today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and I extend that respect to the traditional owners of the countries where our virtual attendees are joining us from today. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon, both in the room and online. I think we have about 300 people in total signed up. Australia is really proud to host this event today in partnership with Clyde & Co Australia. And we're very thankful for their support in making today's event possible. This afternoon, we will be diving into the challenges and opportunities of intergenerational inclusion and how it intersects with technology and workforce strategy. As organizations like our own increasingly employ diverse age groups, I think we all agree that it's very important and more than ever that we break down the barriers and foster collaboration across all generations, particularly with the rise of technology and automation. And as part of that, we also must ensure that everyone, the early generations and early career Gen Zs and the late career baby boomers, have an opportunity to thrive in our companies and in industry. Now, in terms of housekeeping, can I please ask everyone to turn off their mobile phones on silent mode? But that said, please keep them handy because you will need them later as part of the session. We also want to point out that we are recording the session. You will see someone with a camera walk around for a little bit, and it will appear later in the dive-in platform. And there will also be a short replay on LinkedIn that we will be posting in due course. Now, I'm very excited to hand over to our new CFO, Diana Baer. She will be guiding us through today's discussion, and I hope that you all find this discussion today valuable. You have an opportunity to learn, to network, but also to really be part of shaping something, an important conversation that is shaping the future of our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja. Thank you. So I'm very, very grateful to be here and very excited about the conversation that is going to happen today. I really like the topic of intergenerational inclusion for two reasons. So first, I think it's so personal. So we are all in a certain age. We have all been in a different generation across our career. So it's something that relates to all of us. And if I may invite everyone online and in the room to think about your own experience. I'm sure you had situations in your lifetime and in your career where you were working with someone from a different age, different generation. Maybe that created some tension in the collaboration. Think about how you solve that. And maybe also during your career, your age and your generation had an impact on your career, be it a positive or a negative one. So think about that. And I think everyone in the room has a personal story to share, a personal story to think about. So that's why I like about the topic, because it applies to everyone. And the second thing that I like about that topic is the fact that it has so many different perspectives and angles you can look at the topic. So personal story, we just had that, but you can also think about that in terms of leadership. What does that mean when we lead teams, when we lead groups to talk about different generations? What does that mean from a company perspective, for our strategy, for the way we recruit talents, for example? And then the even higher level, the insurance industry level. What does that mean? How do we attract, how we stay interesting for the new talents of the future? So I think all those different perspectives is what brings the richness also into the topic. So to cover all those perspectives, able to cover all of them, but I have a wonderful panel of individuals who bring their very different expertise and point of view to the topic. And please join me in welcoming them. I will invite each one after the other to come to the stage. So I will start with you, Kylie. Welcome. Please come and find a seat on the stage. So Kylie, welcome. Kylie Macfarlane is Deputy CEO of the Insurance Council of Australia and the Chief Operating Officer, and she will be the voice of our industry today. Then I would like to welcome Oscar to the stage. Welcome, Oscar. Oscar Shub is a consultant and founding partner at Kylie Co. Australia, and he will be sharing his experience across different geographies, across different generations in the law and insurance industry. Then I would like to welcome Nate on stage. Welcome. Dr. Nate Zettna is lecturer in the discipline of work and organization studies at the University of Sydney Business School. So we're hoping and research insights from you today. It's just a joke because he says he's not so academic, so we'll see how it goes. And then last but not least, Cynthia, a warm welcome also to you on stage. Cynthia Cottrell is Managing Director Pacific for Workforce Solutions and Product at Mercer. So she has the more global perspective, and also her secret passion for technology will be an interesting insight also into the conversation today. So welcome to all of you. I just need one note because Thank you. Before we start the conversation, I'm sure you're all excited to ask your questions already to that super interesting panel. So just a little organizational topic. You remember Anya said you keep your mobile phone in your hands. So maybe we can test it already now. So just to manage expectation, we will have a short start in the panel round, and then I will open for Q&A a bit later on in the session, but then you can just already prepare that. So all you need to do is to open an internet browser, www.slido.com, and then to enter that code 2502760. You don't have to do it right now. You can do it later during the session, but that's you could already share your questions. I will get them later on my mobile, so I'm not bored if I'm looking at that. It's just because I will see all your questions. So you can also nicely vote for one question if you like it, and I will see that directly on my screen for later on. So thank you for your attention and your preparation on the technology side already. So then let's start the conversation. And I would like to start, Kylie, with you, with the industry perspective. What have you observed in the industry? What are the barriers that we are having to retain and recruit talents? How have you seen that evolving maybe in the industry? And what's your view on intergenerational inclusion?
Well, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's wonderful to be here. I feel like I'm right in the middle of that intergenerational struggle, right? I'm old enough to have glasses to read, but I still think I'm young enough to try new technology. So if the new technology fails this afternoon, perhaps I fail. But really, as an industry, we're right now, we have a really interesting profile as an industry. One is, and I'll come back to this, Nobody actually knows that they could or should go and work in insurance, and that's a real challenge. The other is that we have a growing demand for labour. We need people. And we also have a rapidly evolving skills landscape. And that skills landscape, as we've seen in the last couple of years, needs a response that is flexible and agile, but also adaptable and have growth mindset. We're also at a demographic cliff. I don't know if you know this, but 30% of the insurance industry in Australia will retire by 2030. 30%. Now, the only thing I've heard worse than that is actually in the education system, where something like 50% of headmasters and headmistresses will retire by 2030. These are massive demographic cliffs that we have to face into. So, firstly, we need to inspire young people to join the industry. But young people are thinking about work very differently than perhaps they are looking for flexibility. They're looking for purpose, and they're looking for clear pathways. Now, I have to say, when I started work as a graduate at Bankers Trust, a long time ago, albeit, I was certainly looking for a clear pathway, but flexibility wasn't even something we considered. It wasn't something that was role modelled, and purpose was something you did on the weekend, right? So these days, though, we live and work so constantly and consistently that those socioeconomic drivers are coming together. And thankfully, particularly for insurance, where purpose is a key driver, something I never realised until I joined the insurance industry, purpose underpins everything that we do. But we do have to diversify our recruitment models because, yes, we need this great pipeline of young people coming through, but we can't just expect them to pop out of university and say, hey, I want to join insurance. We actually know they don't do that. We need to be having these conversations in schools. We need to be having this conversation in the university system, and we need to find atypical pathways for people to join our industry. University as a precursor to a profession is relatively new. Apprenticeship models and cadetship and trades models are a lot more evolved and need to become more common in the insurance industry. You don't actually need a degree to work in insurance. Okay, you can't be an actuary and not have a degree, right? But there are a lot of jobs within the insurance industry that don't require a degree or can give you a pathway to learn and earn along the way. So you can get that degree. You might get there a little bit slower, but you're actually working and getting hands-on learning at the same time. And alongside of that, we have to think about our mature workforce. You know, the pension age is now 67 in Australia. So it's gone up 2 years in the last decade, and it will continue to rise. Now, I don't know if you all know this, but the pension age in Australia was set at 65 because men died at 66. So from a governmental perspective, they went 1 year. Okay, we'll pay you for 1 year. Now, women have always lived longer, hallelujah. But now women and men are living well into their 80s on average. So that pension age will continue to increase, but actually our need to stay neurologically active is absolutely an impediment for longevity. We know this due to increasing Alzheimer and dementia rates in our society. So people want to work. They want to feel like they have a purpose other than getting up and going and playing bowls or golf or whatever it is. But they don't want to work full time necessarily, but they do want to transfer that incredible knowledge they've got to the next generation. So how do we help people at the end of their career diversify what their career looks like in their third age? And then there's all of us in the middle. And we know that we're looking not necessarily to do the same job for life. We want different opportunities. We want to diversify our skill set. We want potentially promotions, or we want to move sideways and do something a bit different for a while. And that flexibility needs to be there. So we do have to change the way we think about building our workforce. We also need to consider how we do that inclusively, because one of the wonderful things we'll talk about today is technology. And technology is actually one of the most fantastic inclusive tools. COVID taught us that we don't all need to be sitting at 60 Martin Place to do our job. And there are many Australians well qualified or indeed well eager to be working and being productive, but they might just not live in our capital cities, or they may have a disability that prevents them from being able to easily come into a workplace, or they might just have other aspirations in their life that mean that they don't want to be at work from 9 till 5 every day, but they do want to work, but they also want to pursue, looking at Larissa, their international ice skate, roller skating. I've got you as a roller skater now. Ice skating careers, or their professional sport careers, whatever they are, or parenting, or whatever it is. So we do need to be agile, we need to be inclusive, and we need to be always tech ready. And in today's society, that means being AI ready. Now, AI is already being introduced into the insurance industry. 35% of insurers are using it, but 40% of the financial services industry doesn't. Now, quite often that's driven by mistrust and fear. But what we know about AI is, like any new technology, those who are empowered to control it and to use it to their benefit and to the organisational benefit will succeed. So how do we make that easier? And how do we do that in an inclusive way? Because again, it's a technology that supports inclusivity. But ultimately, we need to be looking at building a workforce that reflects our society and our community. It was why the ICA, along with our working group members, members of the Insurance Council, designed the Talent Roadmap and launched that last year. Through that roadmap, we've looked at how we build an engaged and flexible workforce, how we attract talent, retain that talent, and also how we build up the profile of the insurance industry. Hopefully you saw our advertising campaign last year, but a big part of that is about saying to people, hey, insurance is actually sexy. You should come and work for us. We have lots of different careers. You don't need to be a mathematician or an actuary to be here, but you will have a purposeful career while you are. Thank you.
Wow, fascinating. A lot of insights already. Thank you, Kylie. Yeah, I would like to come to the personal level after that. So, Oscar, you have decades of experience in the law and insurance industry, I understood. And I'm sure you have a lot of personal stories to tell us. How does that resonate, what Kylie just said, and what have you learned during your career? What has changed over time?
Yes, I suppose so. Look, what we know is that we are living in a time in history where it is really the first time in history where generally you can find 5 generations in the same industry, in the same offices, etc. And that means that you've got to find a way of working side by side with people from the baby boomers, and I believe I'm called a baby boomer, but I think I'm much older than that, and right down to level Gen Z, and I'm sure that there are going to be people in this audience who are in every section of the measurement, and I think that I'm going to read something just now from the McKinsey report, which will make everybody think about, do they fit into that categorization that McKinsey has determined? The older generations often contribute that deep knowledge that they've built up over all the years, the loyalty, the long-term perspectives. I shouldn't be waving it. The long-term perspectives, and younger colleagues, meanwhile, they bring digital fluency, which the older generation may not have, fresh ideas, a strong demand for purpose and flexibility. So you've got to find the way of dealing with that, because any organization that can deal with those differences is going to gain resilience and is going to have a much broader view of the market and much more attraction to the market. So what must leaders do? The first thing that leaders must do is they must recognize that this is an important issue. They must not see it as a problem that they need to solve. They must actually see it as an opportunity in which they must now cultivate, because there's a very big difference in that thought process as to how people will ultimately deal with it. And any major organization that actually achieves that and masters that dynamic is going to be way ahead of any other market environment. And that will unlock enormous possibilities, including for insurance, if they can maintain keeping the older generation while bringing the new generation in without the new generation feeling that there's blockages. And so there is an important element to that. And I know I've been in partnerships in major law firms, both in South Africa and in Australia, where there was always a pressure from the young people seeing the grey hair starting to emerge, because they felt that there was a blockage. And so organizations need to recognize that. They need to learn how to deal with that. The older people must also recognize that they want to stay in the workforce, but can they adjust their own position in the workforce? I know from my personal experience that I started to retire as a partner 5 or 6 years before I actually did retire as a partner, because I felt that that was cutting back and cutting back and cutting back to allow other people to see that growth opportunities were there. So that's a very important issue. But it's that recognition on both sides that is very important. What I wanted to read to you was what McKinsey said, and now you can analyze your own situation. Gen Z brings in fearless experimentation, rapid adaptation, usage jumps enormously in that age group from 14 to 17, which is Gen Z, and integration of AI into daily workforce. Even though they're not in the workforce, I mean, they use AI for everything. They can use AI for thanking people for inviting them to dinner and get a perfectly worded dinner invitation, thank you note. Then you go to the millennials and the Gen Y are often ranked together. That goes from about 1981 to 1997 or something. And there they talk about strategic application, balanced evaluation skills, bridge building between generations. Then Gen X provides pragmatic implementation, risk assessment capabilities and systems thinking. And boomers contribute deep expertise, quality standards and verification, methodical documentation. When they engage, they create reproducible processes. So those will fit to many people. No, not everybody, but still, that describes the differences. And you can see it in the way that things operate. A young person coming into an organization, call it maybe millennial, and they will get onto give them a task to work on, and they will go away and in the shortest amount of time, they'll come back with what they say is the answer. Now, one has to be careful because the answer isn't always in AI, and the answer isn't always right in AI. So you need to recognize that that's not a skill that you have yet developed, and it's a skill that you need to develop, because you need to recognize that when you get the answer from AI, you examine it, you test it in your mind, you think about its application. Going to the other end of the scale, like my end of the scale, it'll take me a lot longer to get the answer because I hardly know what to ask Copilot or whatever. But what I get when I get something will be considered, will be thought through, will be tested in my mind. So the ideal situation is when you build this respect between the baby boomers and the younger generations, that respect allows each element of the range of people to make a proper contribution to the outcome that arises. And what that means is that you have to identify the need to have tutoring, not in the traditional sense, not some old grey-haired person tutoring a brand new graduate, but both directions. That graduate should be allocated to an older person who might have difficulty with all the technology, etc., and that person will then also be tutored by the older person. So you've got to get that cross flow between the generations to actually achieve the result that you want to achieve, and that's very important. And then the question arises as to how you do that, because I know that I've always worked in large law firms. They've always had IT departments, and now I'm now a consultant, no longer a partner in Clyde & Co. But we have offices all over the world, and so I can be working on something at 11 o'clock at night, and I can run into a problem because something I've clicked on doesn't work, or something that I'm trying to change doesn't change, and all those things that happen to me regularly. I can pick up the phone and somebody in the world will answer me, and somebody in the world will help me. And I can tell you that there are some places in the world that when I phone, they say, "Hello, Oscar."
Are you sure it's not AI, Oscar?
So that indicates how technologically advanced I am. But the question is, how do you give that help? And what I've found is that, well, if I go through to Ohio, and I'd say I've got this and this problem, they say, "I'm sending you an invitation to hand over your screen." And then within about 45 seconds, they've resolved what I thought was the most difficult problem. The problem with that is, and I know it's my fault, not theirs, the problem with that is that is not a teaching experience. There's no learning that comes out of that, because I have no idea when that thing happens a week later, I'll be back on and I'll get through to Edinburgh, and they'll have to do the same thing. I think it is important to recognize that people who are training or dealing with people who need assistance must do it differently. And I have taken somebody who comes to my home occasionally, more or less once a week, to try and teach me various different things. And he sits in the chair not at the screen, but next to me. I'm in the screen, I'm next to the screen, and he forces me. He tells me what to do, but he forces me to do it. Now that is the way that you do learn something. The only other thing I want to say about this kind of change, because it is a change and it's a change of thinking, and any change in any organization has its difficulties, and you have to try, whenever you're trying to introduce a change, you have to try and identify a champion for change, and in a completely different environment, not insurance related, not employee. I would say it is a bit employment related. When I arrived in Australia, it was in 1986, I can tell you that there were very few women partners in law firms. I was in the Perth office of a national law firm, and I had employed a large number of women into the insurance department, which is what I was running. And as it grew, I was pressuring for partnership for these women. I can't tell you how much resistance I had. The arguments were very convincing, very convincing. I was told, you can't have senior associates or partners who are women because they're having babies, or they have babies, or they're not going to have babies. But if they don't work past 3 o'clock in the afternoon, what are they going to do? What are the clients going to do when they've got to get hold of them? Well, that's very convincing, I have to say. It's so convincing, I just had to say, well, tell me something. What do clients do when there's a male partner running a 5-week trial from 10 a.m. till 4 p.m. and they want him? Do they manage? And they, eventually they succumbed. Many of those women that were partners in the department when I was in the Perth office, there were 8 partners, 5 of them were women, and 3 of them became judges. So it did indicate, and it changed things. It managed to change the thinking, but you can't, the women would not have got there. You can't have women championing women's causes. You've got to have men championing women's causes. And in the same way, you've got to have younger people championing the acceptance of older people in the organization, because older people can't champion that, and it will not succeed.
Thank you, Oscar. I like your idea of cross mentoring between the generation. I remember when I got my first leadership role, I was for 6 months in the same role with the person who had that position before me, and she was going into retirement. And it was such a great learning experience because she was willing to give me her knowledge and to introduce me into the role. So I can fully rely on what you said. Well, you know what I also like is you're championing the change. So that's a cool concept to remember, I think today. Nate, is that something you see in your research, like championing changes? Do you see that in successful teams working across generation? What is your view on it?
Thanks very much, Diana, and thanks for having me here. It's always interesting as an academic to be in a room full of industry people.
Thank you for being here.
But also a really hard act to follow with lots of experience from Kylie and Oscar. And really good question, Diana, around I've been taking a lot of notes myself because I think, sorry, as an academic, it's a really inside joke, but I will stop with the joke. But I have a lot of thoughts around the championing as well, because I think the big issue when we talk about age and intergenerational differences is people make a lot of assumptions, and we see that a lot in the research we do and the research that is coming out in recent years around age and age diversity in the workplace, is that we do tend to make a lot of assumptions about certain age groups and generations. And as Oscar also hinted, there might be some general trends that exist at different age generations, but there will also be individual differences and also the culture that different teams bring. So I think if we're going to assume that, you know, someone who's older than us knows the know-hows and the younger person knows the tech, I don't think that's always the case as well. Like, we are seeing recent trends. I'm sure Cynthia will talk to this in terms of the workforce data analytics side as well, that a lot of younger workers, whilst they have that digital technical fluency, they don't know what's right or wrong. They don't know how to see what's correct or not as well. That's coming through in a lot of the grad programs. So first of all, being able to know who knows what is very important. And then that's when the championing is, you know, it's much clearer for what the champion needs to do, what cause they're trying to fight for. I'm going to go through kind of some of the dot points. And that's why I think age is a very complex type of demographic difference, because people don't often talk about age like how we talk about gender or culture, because it has both kind of invisible and visible cues to it. Like, okay, you might look younger or older, but actually, I don't really know how old you are. Actually, like in reality, it's actually quite hard. And also then, but when you try to place an age on someone, then you bring all these different assumptions and connotations.
And it's changing over time, right? You're not always young
exactly.
or old or whatever.
What if I get a facelift, right?
Yeah.
So like, I think that's age is very complex, and I think we need to be able to debunk some myths around and be able to educate the industry and the workforce a little bit more about those.
So take away the boxes. Right?
Yeah.
Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And actually, there's a lot of recent research saying that in many circumstances there is not a significant or generational difference in certain like things like well-being or things like people being treated different ways, but it's more about the perception that you have about age. I think that's much more important. As humans, it's the reality is what we perceive, right? So it's not when you were born, what the year you were born, so as much as you see this person as an older person or you see this person as a younger person. So it comes back to your perspective, and it's taking a step back and reflecting on that is much more helpful than assuming. And I think a lot of the points I think Oscar also mentioned around that leadership aspect, I think like leadership is very important and mentoring is very important. And, champions don't always have to be leaders. And we know in the real world that leaders don't need to have a formal title either. Like being able to emerge as someone who can speak on others' behalf and be able to identify those voices is really, really important. But in those formal settings, what can actual official leaders do in embracing diversity? And in the research, we found that, there are certain not traits, because traits are what we're born with, but certain behaviors that leaders can take on and be trained in, such as being humble and having humility. And I don't know what it is like in the insurance industry, and you can tell me about this, but in some contexts where like being humble is actually quite risky for leaders, because you don't want to be seen as weak or being seen as, someone who admits that they don't know something, right? And a lot of this is another assumption people make. A lot of older workers might feel that they're not comfortable in showing their weaknesses or showing their mistakes. But on the flip side, the research has shown that being able to do that creates a lot of sense of safety. That feeling that, hey, even if people who are seasoned workers who have experience are able to know their limitations, and we're human, we all make errors, make mistakes, are able to do that, then that creates a much safer environment for people to speak up, to share their opinions as well. And that actually spreads. So the research shows that when leaders or people who are championing causes are able to show humble behaviors, the team actually becomes it's contagious actually. And that actually is very important in an age diverse setting, because people from different age groups, regardless of what skills you have, you will bring different knowledge, skills, and abilities. And in those settings, by showing those humble behaviors, social cues allows people to be much more open to communicating and to be more proactive and wiser in the decisions they're making as well. And then a lot of the research we do is actually around redesigning work. So work is forever changing, and I think that's the same as the insurance industry, like AI technology, which I think Cynthia will talk about very soon. Well, I think the world is always changing, like socio-political situations, technology, AI, even us all living longer. So being able to accommodate. So I think as in the industry, we don't think often, and a lot of the times we think that we don't have time to do this, is to revisit our roles. And is our role fit for purpose at the moment with the challenges that we're facing in the industry? Is our role suitable is it right for this person? And I think that constant change actually begs us to think, well, maybe we should annually rethink the different tasks and the different people we're involved with. And a lot of the research shows that being able to redesign work is really important for one's well-being. And the big survey that we ran across multiple industries has shown that most people in multiple industries don't get an opportunity to redesign their work. So most of the time you just apply to a new job or you get promoted, but you actually don't get to stop and think, is what I'm doing fit for purpose or the right thing to do?
Yeah. I see Kylie's noting a lot.
This idea, I think, as we're thinking about how we introduce AI into our workplace, for example, actually the whole point is to pause and redesign how you work and to not be scared about what you're giving up, because actually you need to redefine it as low value or unproductive, but actually to then think about the opportunity it's opening up for you to dive into. So, actually maybe you could stay in that job for a lot longer because it evolves with you and with the technology.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that redesigning aspect is important. And when organizations do try to revisit roles, or it's often a bit too late. It's like, oh, you've already faced this issue. You've already had this challenge. So let's try to fix your issue.
It's a reaction, right?
Yeah, it's very kind of the analogy is like that ambulance at the bottom of the cliff situation. You've had an issue. We'll bring in the ambulance.
Fix it.
Let's fix it. But I think the better way to do it is, well, what are the root causes at the moment? So if your tasks are not organized in the right way, are not aligned with the expertise that you have or the experiences that you have or the technological fluency that you have, then what can we do to change that? And even when organizations try to do that, it's very individualized in that, oh, it's just your role. You're the problematic one kind of situation. But you don't work alone, and I don't think any of us in insurance works alone, right? Like you work as a team. So when you change your roles, it actually impacts those around you. So the conversation has to be collaborative, or what we call a co-design approach. So you need to involve everyone who's in the team in redesigning some of these roles along with the leader, and it has to be a bi-directional mentoring in a way. Like I think mentoring is great, but we don't talk enough about bi-directional mentoring, where younger workers can also mentor older workers as well. And it's kind of an oxymoron in a way, because often we think of mentoring as, people who are more experienced mentoring those who are less experienced. But what is experience? It doesn't always come with age. It comes with the things you've engaged with, the different clients you've dealt with, for example. There's different skills you have. So it's that different type of mentoring, and being able to bi-directionally mentor back upwards, I think is very useful. All right, lost my list of things to talk about. And I think another trend we're finding in the research at the moment is that we don't talk enough about things like mental health and well-being. And I just kind of picked Cynthia's brain just now about in the workplace, and age and age diversity has a lot to do with it. Like, and I want to bring up the example of well-being, because different age groups generally, I don't want to make assumptions, have quite different perceptions about talking about mental health issues or well-being issues. And in a high stress work environment, for example, like financial services, or I'm sure in insurances in many parts of it, can be quite stressful. And that different generations and people from different age groups kind of tolerate and deal with mental health and stress challenges in different ways. But if the culture doesn't allow people to talk about it or be open to it, because it depends on who's running the culture, then that's very problematic as well. And I think being able to recognize the trends now around well-being and the conversations around that will be really helpful moving forward for different age groups. Now, that inclusion piece goes back to my initial kind of thought around the complexity of the workplace, that that we shouldn't stereotype age groups, and we should kind of debunk some myths around age groups. So what is inclusion, right? And I heard the quote earlier, like what belonging is tomorrow. And when I go back to the actual understanding of what inclusion is, it's not just belonging, but that your uniqueness is valued. So you might get invited to, join a group or go to lunch with other age groups, but is your uniqueness, what you bring to the table, valued? Because if it's only just that you feel belong, that's not truly inclusion. It takes that extra step that people see that. And it's funny because a lot of people in the team setting might value it, but they don't say it. And if you don't show that you value other people's contributions, their unique knowledge, skills, abilities, then people don't really know. And I think being able to explicitly do that is much more helpful as well. And then I guess my closing remarks from my part is around that consistent monitoring and being able to check progress as well. So if we are able to understand and redesign properly, but also continually do that and track. So a lot of the times organizations will try to redesign jobs and then they never revisit if that person ended up enjoying their job more or not, or tracking trends, like did they end up quitting? Did they end up get promoting? Did they move teams? Being able to track all of that, and this starts to go into Cynthia's like data part, is really important as well. And I think we need to do more in that monitoring, tracking progress.
Wow, thank you, Nate. Cynthia, go ahead. I think you have the most global view and the more.
I have the best seat in the house. I go after everybody and hopefully don't pile on or repeat. I'm going to come at this a slightly different way off the back of a wonderful build up to why we're talking about intergenerational workplaces and inclusion and technology all in the same topic, because we need like maybe 3 more days to really properly, right, Oscar, I think to really unpack it. But let me try and give you some stats to think about, and then I'm going to try and help you visualize why this matters, all these 3 terms in the same. So the World Economic Forum just published some data recently, and we talked about 30% of the insurance sector employees will be retiring by 2030. So by this might make sense now, puts it in context globally. So by 2050, the number of people aged 60 and older is forecast to hit 2.1 billion. Okay, that's double today's figure. Double today's figure. That's not very far away from now. Now, the good news, right? If you were a male born in 1925, you only had a 50% chance of making it to 65. So here, they wouldn't have ever made it to the pension pay age. But if you are a child born today, you have more than a 50% chance of living to 90. Okay, so if 60 is where we expect the doubling effect to happen to the global population of workers, there's 30 more years in that, right? So I'm trying to pose, Kylie, the optimistic version of
Working when I'm 85.
Good point. But I'm going to ask everyone to just sort of consider the art of the possible, right? And I'm going to help you try and visualize this potential new world that's intergenerational, that is absolutely impacted by technology. And yes, AI takes a big part of that credit. I worked for IBM for almost 17 years and have always focused on technology as it relates to enhancing human performance. And as a technologist, I'm a little bit sad that ChatGPT and Gen AI takes all the credit for the voracious appetite everyone seems to have about what it will do to work. For many of us who've been in this space for some time now, this is not the first time we have seen a massive inflection in the way we work as a result of technology. I'm going to address some of you who might not have lived through some of the other periods where that has occurred, but AI has been around for about 60 or 70 years now in its current form. The fact that generative AI thanks to the release of ChatGPT in 2022, has made it to the fingertips of almost anyone who has a phone, is what has kind of created that iPhone moment of AI. So it's, again, as someone who researched it and used it in applications for business, it used to be one of those technologies that only if you had really big supercomputers and a lot of money to implement it, it only touched a few people, really. And then consumers would see it on their end. It might feel like a chatbot, or it might have felt like, oh, I'll press this button and my bank transfer will go straight forwards. And they wouldn't know that in the background, much of that was done through programming technology. Right now, we just have an interesting time where we can even see it in our ChatGPT. Oscar, you were telling a great story the other night about at dinner, the parlor trick of being able to write a Shakespearean poem about your dinner. You can see it thinking, and you can command it, and you can control it, and it feels like you are part of the technology, and that is not normal. That's not something that anyone has really experienced until the consumerization of AI recently through Gen AI.
I might add to her comment to say that having read us this Shakespearean sonnet thanking us for dinner, somebody at the table said, but what about if you asked Jackie Mason to do that? And he said, okay. Within 35 seconds, there was Jackie Mason making a very similar thing, just in a Jackie Mason style. So
in like seconds, right? And then if you use the audio version of your ChatGPT these days, it will actually sound like Jackie Mason talking. Yeah, it goes on and on. So what does this all mean, and why is this important in relation to intergenerational workplaces and inclusion? So we've talked a little bit about the labels, and we've talked, and Nate gave I think a nice balanced view that it's somewhat limiting. Let me introduce myself again. I'm Cynthia, and I'm a Gen Xer. I've just told you what generation label I am, but do you know anything from what I've just told you about the way I work or what I care about at work? I could give you the year of my birth, but I won't. But that won't probably tell you either. And so if you can really kind of think about that for yourself, if someone came up and introduced themselves to you with their year of their birth or their label, would you be a better manager of that person? Would you understand how to engage them better in work? Would you understand if AI is impacting their job? Probably not. Probably not. But what you will probably learn about them, and this part I'm going to give you the visualization without giving you all the data. Let's take Bunnings. How many here love Bunnings? Well, maybe you don't have to love it, but you might go there even for a sausage sizzle, even if you aren't buying home improvement. And these days they're more than home improvement. You can buy your pet food there. I know I don't work at Bunnings, I work at Mercer. But I'm just going to talk about Bunnings for a moment, just so I can give you a sense of how this plays out. And yes, it will translate in a minute to insurance, but let me talk about something first about what all organizations are after, including the ones I work for and the ones we research. At the end of the day, whether you are not-for-profit, private sector, insurance, or a big retailer like Bunnings, if you're the CEO, if you're the CHRO, what you care about is attracting and retaining the best possible talent you can. The only time that might not matter is if all of your workforce is an AI agentic workforce, and that would be very different. But generally speaking, we all work in companies and organizations that rely on humans. Okay, so keep those in mind, attraction and retention. So Bunnings, I'm going to talk about them because there's a couple of things that are really interesting about them. And when you go to your Bunnings next, just watch for these things. So 27% of all Bunnings employees are over the age of 50. 27%. The oldest employee, I don't know if anyone will know the answer to this. If you do, then you are a bigger Bunnings fan than I am. The oldest employee at Bunnings is 93. at the Bunnings Canberra store. So if you ever get down there, I highly recommend to go and visit Harold. 93. Talk about multiple top five generations easily. So I tell you that for a couple of reasons. Well, yes, go visit Harold, please. But there's a couple of things that Bunnings does that's really important, and this is kind of why I'm telling you this story. Firstly, they intentionally hire to reflect their community they serve. So if they only hired 20-somethings, and think about your own Bunnings, right? If you go into your Bunnings and you were faced with someone who, maybe wasn't holding the paintbrush the right way or couldn't really talk to you about why a certain pipe fitting wasn't going to work in your bathroom or whatever it might be. That could be an older employee at Bunnings talking to you, though. It could be a younger employee. But all you know is that when you go to Bunnings, you generally have an expectation that when you go in there, you are likely speaking to someone in a green apron who really enjoys being there, and they're typically pretty knowledgeable. In fact, they're so knowledgeable, they get put into their department, whether it's paint or plumbing or flooring or behind the desk. That's kind of the way Bunnings are laid out, right? So we as consumers, we like going there because we like to know that when we're there, we're going to likely be served by someone, or we can go and ask a question, not even buy anything. That's the beauty about Bunnings. You can go and have the sausage sizzle outside, but not actually purchase anything inside the store. But most of us end up buying something. The reason why I'm telling you this is that for Bunnings, it is a strength. It's a strength for them to have an intergenerational workplace. Now, they go another step further. For those who go into Bunnings, now this is another story kind of related. I have a friend who is the chief information officer at another major retailer. Now, he has had his milestone birthday recently at 60, and he's counting down the days till he'll retire from his job so that he can get a job at the paint section of Bunnings. Can you imagine that attraction proposition for insurance, that you would have someone who's going to retire from their normal career say, I cannot wait to get into the call center for this insurance claims. But could it happen? It could, right? And so what is Bunnings doing when we think about why people are so attracted to work there? So that's what I am posing to you as the question. When you think about your own teams and you think about the organizations you come from, whether you're Bunnings or your Munich Re or your Allianz, whatever it might be, the point is that they create this environment where, as Nate mentioned, the experience and knowledge that sits within the team is highly valued. And the reverse mentoring idea that we've been talking about here, that is actually part of onboarding at Bunnings. They purposefully pair you up with someone, not distinctly about, pairing up a boomer with a millennial or Gen Zer with a Gen Xer, but just pairing people up with different teams and different levels of experience. This has been found to create the high levels of engagement at Bunnings. But get this, for retail, the retention rate at Bunnings, so that means those employees who just stay at Bunnings, their retention rate is in the high 80s. Now, most of us, including me, I work in a professional services firm called Mercer, part of Marsh McLennan. We would kill for an employee retention rate of the high 80s. Now, some might say, that doesn't allow for enough churn in the workforce or opportunity, but remember that their workforce is based upon the reflection of their community and the ability to serve customers and help them grow their footprint in the community that they serve. So you would value that loyalty to the brand and that hunger and that desire to want to learn paint and then flooring and then plants and then potentially customer service. And that is a big attraction for them from a career pathways perspective. And that's the last point I want to make for you before we go into Q&A, which is when we talk to organizations, and I work with a lot of organizations who are facing into the impacts of AI, who are thinking about how to mitigate the risks of whole parts of our workforce's institutional knowledge leaving as they retire. We live in a country where we just don't have enough humans to do all the jobs that we need. So when I hear those headlines, those scary ones about AI taking jobs, they are scary, by the way. I'd like to always remind us that we are still in a period where we do not have enough humans to do the jobs that we need doing. And that includes those jobs we don't even know how to describe yet. So I might just close by saying a couple of things that just reiterate a little bit, but I don't want to totally repeat what's been said by this fantastic panel so far. When it comes to navigating the impacts of AI, the changing nature of work, the fact that we are working in intergenerational workplaces, consider two things. Because I think most of us in this room are leaders, or we are team leaders, or we are certainly a part of a team where we have, I'm sure, a thought about our leaders. Be humble and and exhibit that humility, create that safe place to be able to talk about differences, to be able to talk about the fact that you might be looking after an aging parent, whereas another person on the team might be worried about whether or not they'll ever be able to buy a property, versus another person who only goes to Bunnings for the sausage sizzle. Those things are all unique things that are well positioned for teams to talk about and be open about. So being open and being able to create that safe place to be authentic is super important, both from a technology perspective, but also from an intergenerational perspective. And then the second thing I'll just say, but this I'll just leave for you for right now. I encourage everyone to stop talking about jobs. Start thinking about skill. When we stop talking about jobs, we stop associating headcount with a person. We stop thinking about whether or not you're too old for that job. We stop thinking about whether you're too young for that job. Instead, we think about what skill do you have, and does it align to the work that needs to be done? And I think skills is the best level playing field that organizations can pursue in future, meaning really talk more about skill, talk more about the work. How do you match skill to the work? Doing that will create this natural, unbiased view of who's available to do that work, because then you start talking more about the broader talent pool that's really available to all of us. If you do that one thing. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I love the passion of everyone. I would just like to get the opportunity to place some questions, because we have lovely questions from the audience. So we don't have so much time. So probably the conversation will have to continue after this panel. But let me try to see one. So there's one around the question, the 5 days work week. Is that something that's going to be the norm for the next 5 to 10 years? What is your view? With please a short answer to that.
I've considered moving to Finland, where they now work 4 days a week. I think flexibility is an open question. And again, the gift of COVID was that we are now having conversations about what work looks like for individuals, whether that's a compressed week or a 4-day week or 2-day week, what job sharing, whatever it is. These are conversations organisations have to attract and retain talent.
I think I'd like to comment on that, because if we think back in history, when the Industrial Revolution happened, and that's a very long time ago, people were probably concerned about the fact that their working week was being cut down from 7 days to 6 days. And then later, when they were starting to get, shall we say, iron railway lines and things like that, they probably were worried about whether they'd cut down from 6 days to 5 days. So I think that it's not about the time, it's about how you allocate how people change the structure in which they work.
Thank you. And we have an interesting question around, you remember, Oscar, when you said the young generation pushing maybe the older generation to give away some responsibility. So there's someone asking in the audience how to initiate discussions if you're part of that younger generation with the senior colleagues in your company. How do you initiate the conversation around the transfer of responsibility? I don't know if someone has an idea how to start the conversation.
I think it's. I think any successful organisation would or should be aware of that, and these discussions should take place regularly. And younger people should not have to fear raising these kind of issues, asking questions about their career path, because most people, or many people are ambitious. They want to know that what they are doing is being appreciated, is being understood, and that they have a career path which will satisfy them. Not everybody has the same career path, but they will want to know that within their organisation and within their mindset, they are on track to where they want to get to.
Nate, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I think based on the most recent research we're doing at the moment is that whilst organizations can have things they value and the policy is like, oh, we're going to involve people of different ages in a conversation, it really takes like the leaders push and being able to translate that policy and that value into practice. I don't think we do that enough in the workplace where like, hey, let's get together to, share your experiences or create a forum for that, because it's really hard to just randomly initiate conversation and be like, I want to hear your thoughts or push this idea.
I want to get your job. Yeah. What do we do?
So it's like, it's really creating that environment, that safe space, but like doing it intentionally and being clear on the purpose of those events, not just to tick off that you've done it. I think that's the big part. And a lot of research regardless of the policies in organizations, it's really that the belief that leaders have in those policies, that they value it and they want to kind of enact it. I think that's much more important. Yeah.
All right. We have an interesting question also around learning. So what is the biggest opportunity for the members of different generations to learn from each other? We touched on that during the panel as well. Any additional thought?
I might just add, because I ended on skill earlier. Their learning is a common thread across every generation. So that's a good thing. And then I would say back to the generational piece to that, because companies are constantly driving towards this continuous learning or lifelong learning culture, right? And that is the North Star. That is the ambition. If you think about the current time we're in now, depending on where you are in your career, or let's talk now about generation. Let's say you are nearing your 60th birthday and you are considering a change of career because you've got a potential 20 more years to, at least let's call it 17 more years of work. What will you do? Will you do the same things? Will you continue to do it the same way over that period of time? So I would say, as the generational piece does matter, in those cases, the acceleration of learning in those particular generations where the career change may be happening, that would be a good time to accelerate investment in learning individually. But generally speaking, everyone should feel that there's opportunity to take on new skill at any point in your career.
I also think too, it's important to understand that learning new things, applying yourself to learning doesn't mean going back to university. And I think what the internet and tools like AI are giving us is the opportunity to learn in many different forums. For some of us, the want or the desire to go back and have that formal education might still be important, and maybe that you need that recognition to move forward. There are many ways to learn without actually enrolling in a course or applying yourself to working till midnight every night because you've been to work, you've fed the kids, and now you're sitting up trying to do your master's assignment. There are a lot of flexible options now.
And if you can act very quickly, because I think universities are noticing this as well. And I mean, it's true, actually, the rate of people doing postgrad degrees have decreased in general. We all need to earn money. We don't have time to always go back to university. And I think the shift is that we are designing newer ways of lifelong learning. And we want the industry to be able to engage more and know that that exists now as well, that there are sprints, there are short mini courses, or what unique skills that you might learn at a later stage in your career that you might find relevant. So it, like, for example, of cultural kind of intelligence programs or LGBTQA fellowships and things like that allow people to talk about their experiences at work and be able to connect with others. I think naturally learning from those outside the organization is also very helpful.
So unfortunately, we have to come to an end. Maybe a very short one for you, Kylie, because it's so interesting. Do we have strategic initiatives to create new pathways into the industry? I know that you've been working on apprenticeship and those things. If you can give a short answer.
Yes, sure. Certainly the working group, and there are some members of the working group here today as well. There is a lot of interest in how we create new pathways, and whether that's traineeships or apprenticeships. ABI, the UK peak body for the insurance industry, has done a lot of work on apprenticeship models over there. It's certainly demonstrated that with government incentivisation, apprenticeship models are very successful. I think in Australia we have the opportunity to do similar things, whether we call them traineeships or apprenticeships, but the learn and earn model is a really good way of bringing people into the workforce who may have actually been excluded from tertiary education otherwise because of socioeconomic, cultural, language, whatever the issue is, but allows them to meet their economic goals, which might be paying the rent and raising a family, but also getting that academic or learning qualification as well at the same time. So yes, we are through the talent roadmap looking at this. I think it's vitally important, and it's something that companies can do individually or an industry can do collectively. And I think a really good area where we could be are doing a lot at an industry level is how do we create claims workforces that are mobile and can be stood up and down after extreme weather events and so forth, so that we meet the expectations of consumers and stakeholders.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, because we're going to be cut off at the end of this session, especially online. So we really need to come to an end. I have a lot of highlights, takeaway. I hope everyone in the room as well. I take away, don't put people in boxes. Start the conversation around your careers and with the ones around you. Be humble. I take away the topic of a challenge of attracting and staying attracting for talents, and a lot of more, and food for thought, and a lot of more questions we had. I'm sorry we didn't have the time to take them all. Just to finish the session, it takes a village to organize something like that, and you just see a little piece of the people involved here. So I would like to start a little thank you round. So first of all, thank you to all our panelists for being on stage, for taking the time to share your views, your perspectives, and your highlights. It's very, very much appreciated. Thank you all. And I would like to say special thank you to Clyde & Co., our co-sponsor for the event. Without Clyde & Co., the sponsor, this event wouldn't happen as well. A big thank you to Cactus.com at the end. Everyone looking at the video stream, you have a very experienced team behind us supporting the sound, the video, and everything. It's working so smoothly. Thank you for your support. Really appreciated. And I want to end with thanking within Munich Re, a lot of people have been involved as well. So thank you to the whole DEI working group. Thank you to all the IT colleagues involved in the background, and to all our EAs heavily involved as well today. Thank you. Thank you. And If you're still online, I hope so. Please share your feedback. You really value your feedback. What can we do better next time? What did you like? What would we suggest for next time? We have a nice QR code over there. And please, we value what you have to say about that event today.